Well, as the Trump administration stands firm behind the U.S. president's avalanche of executive orders, many of them are already in legal trouble. So far, lawsuits have been filed against at least 3 separate orders signed by Donald Trump ever since he assumed office. More are in the pipeline. Trump's order to freeze federal funding has drawn severe criticism. The decision could disrupt education, healthcare, poverty programs, housing assistance, disaster relief, and several other initiatives that depend on federal dollars. This radical measure follows a similar freeze on most U.S. foreign aid. Democrats have blasted the move as unconstitutional. They have challenged the spending freeze as unlawful and dangerous. On Tuesday, a federal judge temporarily halted Trump's order to freeze hundreds of billions of dollars in federal grants and loans. The suspension will last a week till next Monday. Simultaneously, over 24 Democratic attorney generals have said they are suing to stop the administration from implementing the fund freeze. Many argue the White House memo is written in such a way that it was barely understandable. Now, according to reports, groups representing non-profits, public health professionals are also planning to file a lawsuit against the freeze on grants and loans. The White House has responded to the legal roadblock on its reform, saying the Trump administration is prepared to fight battle over the funding freeze in court. The second executive order facing lawsuits pertains to the ban of transgenders in the U.S. military. Now, according to reports, 6 transgender active duty service members and 2 former service members who seek re-enlistment have filed a case challenging the executive order that seeks to revise the existing policy for U.S. troops. Transgender rights advocacy groups have also filed a separate lawsuit. The executive order, signed on Monday, claims that sexual identity of transgender soldiers is in conflict with the honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle of the American military and alleges harm to military readiness. The third executive order, already facing legal challenges, is a contentious reform to birthright citizenship. Immigrants' rights advocates and multiple states have filed a lawsuit challenging Trump's agenda. Last week, a federal judge temporarily blocked the enforcement of this executive order pending further arguments and called it blatantly unconstitutional. The legal battles are not the only challenge for Donald Trump and his cabinet. A rift has also erupted in civil society. Thousands of Americans took to the streets outside the White House protesting against Trump's federal aid freeze and immigration policies.
This is what democracy looks like. No kings, no kings, no human rights. A human right.
Because this is what democracy looks like.
Transportation, transportation.
Stephen Golub is a political analyst and lawyer. He's now joining us live on this broadcast from California. Mr. Golub, welcome to the program, and it's good to see you. We both agree that President Trump has a mandate to fulfill. We also both agree that even when he was campaigning to become the U.S. president, he did promise some of these actions that he's already doing. Do you think it's about time that Americans lived with their own reality?
No. And thanks for having me. Regardless of what President Trump promised, and some of what he's doing, he did not promise at all. For example, many of his Republican allies said he would not and should not pardon hundreds of violent insurrectionists who tried to reverse or really overthrow the election 4 years ago when President Biden won. So some of what he's doing, he said he'd do. Some he did not promise at all. Above and beyond that, he's just taking a number of actions that basically he has no power to do regardless of what he promised, because it violates the Constitution. And one of these is, for example, the leading example is this effort to freeze federal funding, suspend for at least 90 days most federal funding, including foreign aid, but many domestic purposes services, including maybe even cutting off funding for Medicaid, medical aid for poor people in the country that could affect 70 million people. Congress, under our Constitution, has the power of the purse. The president doesn't. In asserting that he has this, President Trump seems to be doing something very clearly unconstitutional.
Mr. Golub, now that the United States of America prides itself on checks and balances, do you think it's about time that those checks and balances, or the system, does implement these checks and balances when it comes to President Trump and his executive orders?
Well, the checks and balances really is what he's trying to violate, that Congress, as I said, has the power to decide what is and isn't funded. There were laws passed already with bipartisan support in many cases, although that's not crucial, signed into law by his predecessor, President Biden, and that President Trump is now saying those laws don't count because President Trump feels differently about them. The checks and balances should include, in this case, this impoundment of funds, as it's called, going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, hopefully, consistent with what's been done by courts, Republican justices and Democratic justices for years, should say, no, the president doesn't have the power to simply control funding this way. One of our most conservative and notable legal scholars and justices, Antonin Scalia, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, said that the president doesn't have the power to do what, in effect, President Trump is trying to do now. Hopefully, the Supreme Court will go along with that. I'm not absolutely confident about it, since they have bent over backwards for him in other ways, including last year with an egregious decision regarding presidential immunity, saying the president can commit crimes as long as they're related to the functions of his office, which was an unprecedented, unheard of notion until this Supreme Court decided that last year. I still think or suspect that they will not allow President Trump to assert this power, that they will say, no, this is unconstitutional. They'll agree with an initial ruling by a federal judge, which is putting this impoundment of funds on hold, but I'm not absolutely confident about that.
Mr. Golub, there's a lot to talk about, and I wish we could have time to talk about all that, but we are out of time right now. Stephen Golub, thank you very much, as always, for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.